The flower felt cool against my hands, soft like it always had. But this time it clung differently, like it didn't want to let go. I measured everything twice, just to be sure. My fingers trembled a bit when I poured the milk and the measuring. Spoon rattled against the side of the bowl louder than I wanted it to. I paused, exhaled slowly. The kitchen was still and warm from the oven, with just the faintest hint of lavender from the bundle drying near the window. I looked down at my hands, wrinkled, worn, dusted white like snow on old branches. These were the same hands that used to shape tiny sandwiches into hearts, the same hands that cut crusts off bread for picky eaters with giggles in their bellies. They used to reach for me like I held the whole world. I stirred gently, folding the batter over itself, slow and careful. I whispered to myself, "They'll love it," like saying it aloud would make it real. I wasn't sure they'd even notice. The cake. But I needed to make it. Needed to do something with all this. Love I still had. The oven beeped softly. I reached for the pan and poured it in, smoothing the top with the back of a spoon. It smelled like vanilla and memory, warm and aching all at once. Maybe they'd smile, maybe they wouldn't. I just needed them to feel something when they tasted it. I just needed to feel like I still meant something. The oven hummed as I leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. Through the glass, the batter slowly puffed up, golden, full, promising. The scent of lavender danced with vanilla in the air, curling into the corners of the kitchen like something familiar. A single candle flickered near the sink, casting a soft glow on the tile. Everything else was silent. I closed my eyes and pressed my hand gently to my chest. "Just remember," I whispered into the quiet. "Not thank me. Please do not post about it. Just remember." The cake rose steadily, like it knew it carried more than sugar and flour. It carried memory. It carried hope. The ribbon was soft and a little faded, but still the same shade of sky blue I used when they were small. I looped it around the box and tied it slowly, carefully, the way I used to tie their shoes before church. My fingers remembered the motion better than I did. As I pulled the knot tight, I could almost hear their little voices. "Is it chocolate? Can I lick the frosting spoon?" I smiled to myself, even as something heavier settled just beneath my ribs. "I hope this still matters," I whispered, more to the box than to the room. The tea beside me had gone cool. Their porch looked different now, clean, polished, fancy in a way that made me straighten my sweater. I held the box close to my chest, both hands wrapped around it like a shield. Inside, I heard laughter, big, bursting laughter that made the windows shiver, the kind that says you're already too late. I waited, listened. Let the spring breeze touch my cheek. Then I knocked, a little softer than I meant to. The door opened, and I stepped inside. The kitchen was bright and sleek, nothing like the one they used to spill juice in. They didn't look up right away. Their laughter didn't stop. Someone was watching something on their phone, and I heard the burst of a joke I didn't understand. I looked at the cake, then at them. For a second, I wondered, are they laughing at me? Of course they weren't. Or maybe they were. It didn't matter. My arms suddenly felt tired, like the cake had grown heavier in my hands. I adjusted my grip, tried to smile. I placed the box gently on the counter. "From scratch," I said softly, with a smile that took more effort than the baking. They nodded. One said, "Thanks," but didn't look inside. Someone else kept scrolling on their phone. The music was loud. The room felt busy and far away, like I was watching it all through a pane of glass. I stood there for a moment longer than I needed. Waiting for something, anything. No one noticed. So I just stood still, letting the scent of lemon and lavender wrap around me instead. The kitchen used to be chaos, sweet, sticky chaos. I remember their tiny hands reaching for the bowl, smearing frosting across the counter and each other like it was war paint. "Grandma, look!" they'd shout, cheeks dusted with flour, grins so wide it felt like the walls themselves were smiling. "Don't eat it off your fingers," I'd laugh, knowing they would anyway. They'd giggle and run circles around the table while I tried to keep the batter in the bowl. The apron I wore always ended the day looking like it had fought a battle. But I didn't mind. I wore their joy like perfume. The scent of cinnamon and vanilla would hang in the air for hours after. Warm butter on toast, the crackle of the oven. Those were the sounds of being needed, being known. "Can I lick the spoon now?" one of them would ask, eyes shining. "Only if you promise not to tell your mama," I'd wink, handing it over. I was the center of their little world, the one with the magic touch that turned sugar into celebration. I didn't notice the moment it changed, but standing in that same kitchen now, quiet and too clean, I can still hear those giggles tucked into the corners. I close my eyes and hold them there just a little longer. Every Saturday, without fail, I made pancakes, dinosaur-shaped ones. The tails were always too long, and the heads never quite stayed on, but to them, they were masterpieces. "Oh, wow, a brontosaurus," one would shout. Even if it looked more like a camel, I'd flip them from the pan like I was performing magic. "Do another one," they'd beg, clapping with syrupy hands. I felt like a magician, not because the pancakes were good, but because I could make them laugh. The kitchen would smell like maple and sizzling butter. The radio would hum low in the background while they sat cross-legged on the floor, waiting for their next prehistoric breakfast surprise. "You make the best ones," one whispered once, resting their chin on the table edge. That did something. To me. Stuck deeper than syrup ever could. Now sometimes on Saturdays, I make a single pancake. No dinosaurs. Just me, the sizzle, and a memory. At bedtime, they'd pile beside me under a quilt that never quite stayed tucked. One on my arm, another by my hip, all of them warm and half asleep, blinking up at me. "Tell the one with the fox," one would whisper, already halfway to dreaming. So I did, the same story every time. A kind fox in a forest and a moonlit train that waited just for her. They knew the ending by heart, but still gasped like it was new. The fire crackled behind us, casting dancing shadows on the ceiling. Their breath slowed as the words wrapped around them like another blanket. "Will you tell it again tomorrow?" "Of course," I'd whisper. Always. Their trust pressed against me, soft, safe, real. In that hush, I felt like everything was exactly where it belonged. The first time they didn't call, I told myself they were busy. School, work, something. I even set an extra plate at dinner, just in case. The next week passed, then another. The phone sat quiet on its cradle. I walked past it slower each day. Still, nothing. I stopped making the extra roll, stopped checking the ringer. But the silence? That stayed. It stretched its arms into the corners of the house and curled up in my favorite chair. I used to check the mail like it mattered. Now I just close the box and try not to count the days. That silence grew roots, right in the spaces they used to fill. I sat in a little cafe downtown, the kind where you hear every spoon hit the mug. Around me, other grandmothers laughed with kids in bright coats, their voices filling the space like music. No one sat across from me. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug, untouched for too long. My hands, they used to be full of pancake batter. Of tiny hands reaching, of purpose. Now they just rested there. Still, I watched a child ask for a second cookie, watched her grandma laugh and hand it over, and something inside me folded. Not loud, not painful, just quietly final. Someone showed me a video once. One of them, laughing with friends, bright and full of life. I smiled politely, but the ache came anyway. They had new phrases now. Inside jokes, songs I didn't know. "That's them, right?" someone asked. I nodded, but I wasn't in the story anymore. just watching it from the back row. I had only meant to refill the lemonade. Just a quick step into the hallway, pitcher in hand, nothing more. But their laughter caught me, sudden, bright, and sharp at the edges. I stopped cold just behind the doorframe, the tray balanced awkwardly against my hip. My name floated out from the room ahead, wrapped in a tone that didn't feel like love. "Play it again," someone giggled. Then I heard it, my voice, stumbling through "Happy Birthday," a little off-key, a little too proud. The sound of me, warbling and warm, looping on their phones like background noise for their amusement. And then, laughter again. Not soft, not kind. I stayed frozen there, hand resting on the frame like it might hold me up. My heart sank in slow motion, one beat at a time, heavy as wet laundry. The air conditioning clicked on, cold against the sweat building at the back of my neck. The pitcher trembled slightly in my hand. I didn't walk away. I didn't walk in. I just stood there in the dim hallway, halfway between love and something else. Something that didn't have a name yet. But I felt it settle in me, thick and sinking. They played it again. I didn't need to peek in to know. I could hear the video, the wobble in my voice, the way I dropped the knife a little, the way my smile had stretched too wide when I placed the cake down. Their laughter rolled over it all, smooth and easy. And there I was, caught on screen in the middle of trying. "I used to sing you to sleep," I whispered, though no one could hear. Now the sound of me made them laugh. It didn't feel cruel exactly, just like I was on the outside of something I used to be at the center of, like the thread connecting us had quietly snapped, and none of them noticed. Cringe. One word, soft, thrown over a shoulder like it didn't matter. But it landed like a brick in the center of my chest. It echoed in my ears louder than all the laughter. Cringe. That's what I am now. Not sweet, not kind, not the grandma who sewed capes from old pillowcases or stayed up folding paper stars. Just embarrassing. My hands rested on the edge of the counter. My tea's gone cold. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the ripple the word had made inside me. And I knew something small had changed for good. I stepped into the room with a smile I didn't feel, the kind you learn to wear when your heart wants to flinch, but you know you have to act like it's nothing. "Hey, darlings," I said lightly. No one looked up. One scrolled, one chuckled at something on her screen. I stood there for a beat too long, my smile stretched too wide, my arms tucked behind me like I didn't know what to do with them. Their eyes met mine for the briefest flicker. Then, darted away, like I'd interrupted something more interesting. They weren't unkind, just distracted, detached. I used to be the one they ran to. Now I was just scenery. I turned slightly toward the counter, placing the pitcher down with more care than it needed. My cheeks stayed lifted, but my chest was heavy. At that moment, I didn't feel old. I felt invisible. The frosting clung thick in the air, too sweet now. Not warm, not comforting, just heavy. Artificial. I stared at the cake sitting alone, on the counter, the one I'd baked with lavender and quiet love. It looked beautiful. It looked untouched. I had poured something into that batter. A memory, a hope, something I couldn't put into words. But now it just sat there, surrounded by silence. Their laughter had quieted, faded into clicks and hums from their phones. I stood beside it for a long time, waiting, though I didn't know what for. A comment? A glance? Nothing came. The sun had dipped lower outside, casting amber light across the tiles. The kitchen was emptier than it looked. I adjusted the edge of the napkin beside the plate, then turned away. The echo of their laughter followed me as I walked down the hall. And the quiet? It followed me home. I stood by the door, my hand already reaching for my purse when I said it. I should go. The dog needs her medicine. My voice came out even, steady, too practiced. Oh, right, someone replied from the kitchen, not really looking up. I nodded, smiling gently, like everything was fine. Like I hadn't been standing in the hallway 30 minutes ago, listening to laughter that didn't pause when I entered. The ache behind my ribs pressed sharper with every second. But I wasn't going to say that. I wasn't going to ask why. They hadn't touched the cake, or why no one had asked me to sit longer. Blaming the dog was easier. She couldn't speak for herself, and I didn't have to explain the weight I carried back out with me. As I stepped into the hall, the fading light stretched across the floors in long shadows. The scent of sugar and frosting still lingered too, sweet for how bitter I felt inside. The porch light clicked on behind me. It used to feel like a welcome. This time, it just told me I was outside now, and I wasn't sure if I was meant to come back in. I opened the car door and slid into the seat. Careful, quiet. But when I pulled it shut, the sound cracked through the dusk like thunder in a church. I flinched. The silence that followed was worse. Still, final. Like the moment after a curtain drops. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, eyes on the dashboard, but not seeing it. My breath caught in my chest, tight and shallow, not quite a sob, but something close. All that laughing, all that scrolling, all that absence. I hadn't said what I wanted to. I hadn't asked. And now I sat in a car that felt too small for the ache inside me. The key turned in the ignition, smooth and familiar. The engine rumbled to life, steady, unbothered, but something inside me gave way with it, like a gear slipping loose. The tears came fast. I hadn't expected them. Not then, not there. But they rushed down my cheeks, hot and quiet, like they'd been waiting for their cue. I didn't make a sound, just let them fall one by one. I gripped the wheel. I needed something to hold. The radio played low, some soft old tune, but I couldn't hear it over the pulse in my ears. I didn't plan to fall apart. But I did. The road stretched in front of me, soft and gray in the fading light. But I couldn't really see it. Tears blurred. The street signs until they looked like watercolors bleeding at the edges. Brake lights shimmered ahead of me like stars too close. I blinked, but it didn't help. I kept both hands on the wheel, holding it like an anchor. I wasn't afraid of the road. I was afraid of unraveling more than I already had. The houses on either side drifted past slowly. Lights in windows glowed like warm invitations I'd never received. I whispered, "It's okay," even though it wasn't. Even though I didn't believe it, I just needed to say something out loud. Something that wasn't silence. I turned left where I usually turned right. Not because I had somewhere else to be, but because I didn't want to get home just yet. Home felt off. Like it might not greet me the way it used to. I drove slowly, watching the sidewalks and store windows like I'd never seen them before. There was a florist with peeling paint, the bakery that still smelled like cinnamon even this late, but none of it reached me. Not really. I passed a woman walking her dog and wondered if anyone had looked for me after I left. Probably not. I loosened my grip on the wheel just slightly and let the quiet hold me. It didn't have answers, but at least it didn't pretend. The music came on low, some old tune that used to live in my kitchen. They would dance barefoot to it, stepping on each other's toes, laughing like nothing else in the world mattered. Used to sing along. Now, the sound felt hollow, like something carved out of me. I reached down and turned the volume knob gently until the music was just a whisper. But the memory? That stayed loud. The water ran warm over my hands as I rinsed. The last plate, the scent of cinnamon still hanging in the air from the slice of cake I couldn't finish. The radio murmured some soft tune from the corner shelf, barely louder than the rain just starting outside. It was the kind of evening where no one comes by, where the quiet wraps around the house like a shawl, familiar and still. Then came the knock, just once, gentle, like whoever was out there wasn't sure they should be. I froze. I actually turned down the faucet to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The knock came again, and this time I moved, drying my hands on the edge of my apron as I walked to the door. When I opened it, there was Cheryl. Her coat was damp at the shoulders. She held a foil-covered pie in her hands and wore that soft look, the kind people wear when they already know something they haven't said. "I didn't want you to eat alone tonight," she said. Something in me unknotted, just a little. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "The kettle's already warm." Cheryl didn't come in with big words or questions. She just unzipped her coat, hung it near the door, and sat at the table like she'd always belonged there. "Do you have any of that chamomile tea I like?" she asked, voice gentle. I nodded and turned toward the stove. The kettle started to hum. She didn't bring up the video, but I saw it in her eyes, the kind of knowing that feels like an arm around your shoulder, not a finger pointed at your chest. When she finally said, "I saw it," I didn't flinch. I just poured the water and let her voice settle into the room. There was no judgment in it, just kindness, and something heavier underneath that I didn't need her to name. We each cradled a warm mug, mine with tiny roses, hers plain blue with a chipped handle. The chamomile steam curled between us, filling the space where words didn't need to go. The house felt different with her in it, less quiet, but not louder, just full in a way I'd forgotten it could be. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't fidget or look away. She looked at me, just looked, and stayed. That was the gift. No explanation, no performance, just presence. The tea, somehow, tasted better than it had in months. We had just started on the pie when she said it. They don't know what they've lost. She said it like it was fact, not comfort. Like it was as obvious as the thunder that rolled softly outside. I stared at my fork for a moment, the tip resting against the crust. It hit me in the chest, not like a wound, but like something finally settling where it belonged. I felt the tears rise just behind my eyes, but they didn't fall. "I didn't need to hear that," I whispered. But I think I really did. Cheryl just nodded. She didn't try to fix it or fill the space. She just sat there letting the truth be enough, and somehow it was. We didn't talk much after that. The candle on the windowsill flickered gently as rain tapped against the glass. The whole house felt hushed, like it was listening too. We sat together, not needing to fill the air, just two women with tired hands and hearts that had held more than they ever let on. She reached over at one point and gave my hand a small squeeze. I didn't even realize how tightly I'd been holding my napkin. With her there, the storm didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a lullaby. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I had to pretend I was okay. For the first time in days, I felt seen. The morning light came in pale through the frosted windows, soft and gray. I sat on the edge of the couch with the fire humming low and steady behind me, phone in hand, thumb hovering. No messages, no new likes, just the same scroll of faces, filtered smiles, and silence where their words should have been. I didn't feel angry, not even sad, just tired. I tapped the screen, held it down. "Delete app?" it asked. I didn't hesitate. No post, no goodbye, no quiet little story with a waving hand, just a click, and then stillness. A long exhale I didn't know I'd been holding. The radio played something soft in the background, a voice I didn't recognize, but it sounded calm, almost like company. I set the phone down, face down. I chose silence, not because I was giving up, but because for once I needed to stop waiting to be seen through a screen. I didn't need the scroll to tell me who I was, not anymore. I rolled the dough gently across the floured counter, my palms slow and steady. The house smelled of yeast, and something quiet, not sadness, not joy, just warmth. Outside, the snow kept falling. A steady hush over the world, covering every branch, every rooftop. I shaped the loaves carefully. My hands, once used to braiding hair and packing school lunches, now folded softness into something that would rise. The oven clicked as it preheated. I tucked the pan inside, closed the door, and waited. The scent grew richer, like hope had a smell. I watched the snow pile up across the front step, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel left behind. This bread, it wasn't for anyone in particular, but it mattered because I made it, and I was still here. The yarn was soft between my fingers, pale blue and slow to unwind. I pulled it through, loop after loop, the needles clicking gently like a lullaby. I didn't know who would wear the scarf, maybe someone I'd never meet, but every row was a rhythm, a small act of care I could still give. The firelight flickered over the basket beside me. Snow tapped lightly at the window like it didn't want to intrude. With each stitch, I felt something loosen in me, not fall apart, just soften, like grief was finally exhaling. I used to check the phone every hour, a habit I didn't even notice anymore. But one evening, I realized I hadn't looked all day. No missed calls, no unread messages, and oddly, I didn't feel sad. The silence, once sharp, had turned soft. I made a cup of peppermint tea and curled into my chair. The lamplight, casting shadows across the walls like old friends, the clock ticked gently. The house breathed easy, and so did I. I stood at the window with my hands around a warm mug, watching the snow erase everything in sight, the walkway, the car, even the path I used to walk every morning. It felt like a blessing, like the world says, you don't have to show up today, just rest. I let the curtain fall back and returned to my chair. Outside disappeared, but inside glowed. Sometimes being unseen feels like permission. That winter didn't bring visitors. No parties, no plans. But I stopped waiting for them. I lit candles in the evening. I kept the kettle full. I read books out loud just to hear a voice in the room. The fireplace crackled gently, shadows dancing on the walls like they had their own quiet language. I didn't feel lonely. I felt like I was slowly remembering a version of me that existed before the applause, before the pain. She was still here. She just needed time to return. I opened the drawer slowly, fingertips brushing past old receipts and half-used notepads until I found it. A pale blue envelope, the kind I used to use for birthday cards and baby pictures. I reached for the tiny jar tucked in the corner, where I kept a few dried sprigs of lavender. She used to love the scent, would crush it between her fingers and wrinkle her nose like it tickled. I tucked one gently inside, careful not to let it crumble. My hands trembled a little as I smoothed the flap closed, not from age, but from the soft ache of hope. Not expectation, not even forgiveness, just hope, the kind that's quiet and risky, and shaped like a letter. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't asking for anything. I just wanted to say, you were always loved, even if the world got too loud to hear it. The pen felt heavier than I remembered, but the curl of the letters came back to me like muscle memory, slow but sure. I didn't rush. I wanted every word to settle. I wrote about the small things, how the porch still creaks where she used to leap from the last step, how I still keep the jar of marbles she once tried to sell to her cousins for 5 cents each. I told her how I missed her laugh, especially the toothless one when she was 6 and lost her front teeth on the same day. I didn't write about the video or the silence. This letter wasn't about what broke. It was about what had always been there, even Under the cracks, the wind pushed the curtain inward as I dotted the last I. I love you, I wrote, no matter the noise. Then I set the pen down, closed the page, and let the paper hold what I couldn't say out loud. I stood at the mailbox longer than I should have, envelope in hand. It felt heavier than paper. I ran my fingers across the seam once more. Maybe it was silly, but part of me thought warmth could pass through, that she might feel it somehow. There's no right way to say, I still care, I still remember. I didn't expect her to write back, or to even read it twice, but I needed to send it anyway. The box creaked as I opened it. A single daffodil bent in, the breeze by the walkway, as if nodding along. I slipped the envelope in and let the door close softly. Some things you don't send for answers. You send them to set yourself free. I curled into my chair by the window, tea warm in my palms. I didn't check my phone, didn't wonder if she'd seen it. The breeze carried a scent of earth, damp and waking, like the start of something. The curtain lifted just slightly, dancing in the light. I sat still, breathing it in. Writing to her had stirred something in me, something I hadn't felt in a long while. Not closure, not healing, just space. Like I'd opened a window in my chest. And finally, the air was moving again. Even without emojis, even without a sent notification or a typing bubble, that letter felt real. Messy cursive, smudged ink where I paused too long, a paragraph scratched out and rewritten softer, but it was mine, and it reminded me that I still had something to give, something with weight, warmth, and care. The sun dipped low, casting golden streaks across the desk. The radio hummed some familiar tune, nothing urgent. I leaned back in the chair, letting the last bit of light land on the place where my name had been signed. It wasn't perfect, but neither am I, and still, it mattered. There was no call, no text. Just the knock, 3 soft taps, almost too polite. When I opened the door, they stood there with grocery bags in hand and expressions too careful to be casual. Their smiles were tight, like they'd practiced them on the drive over. "We thought we'd cook today," one of them said, holding up a bag of carrots like it was peace. "Not sorry. We can't talk, just carrots and casseroles." I nodded, stepped, aside. The house let them in, like it didn't know what to feel either. Spring air drifted in behind them, warm but unsettled, carrying a scent of something about to bloom, or break. As they moved past me, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Not in fear, not in anger, just in weight. They were here, and I didn't know what that meant yet. But I let them in anyway. They clattered around the kitchen, pulling out pots they had to ask where I kept. The soup bubbled too soon, too high. Someone stirred it like they didn't know how to stop. Garlic and rosemary filled the room, strong, rich smells that once meant home. But tonight, they felt like cover. "Do you still keep the cutting board under the sink?" one asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded, wiping the same spot on the counter 3 times. No one mentioned the cake, or the laughter. They moved like guests, careful, offbeat. I stayed near the window, pretending to tidy, pretending I didn't. Notice how none of them looked me in the eye for too long. The kitchen was warm with steam, but the space between us stayed cold. I opened the old hutch and pulled out the good china, white with blue edges, the ones they used to fight over. "Mine has the flower," one would shout. "No fair," another would cry. Not tonight. Tonight. They barely glanced. Still, I laid them out with care. Forks lined just right, napkins folded the way I used to. Not for them, really. For me, some rituals stay, even when the people don't notice, because love, like habits, can be quiet and stubborn. They filled the space with stories, work stuff, a neighbor's leaky roof, someone's kid made the honor roll. I smiled when I should. nodded when the pause came. "Oh, that's great," I said, like I was part of it, but the words floated past me. I sat at the end of the table, listening from behind something invisible. It felt like watching my own family through someone else's window. I used to be in the center. Now I was nearby. No one said it. Not a word about the video. But after every sentence, there was a beat. A silence too heavy to ignore, like they knew what they should say. And didn't. I didn't push. I just listened. The spoon, tapping gently against the bowl. The wind rustled the curtain. Their voices walked carefully around the thing we all felt. The silence sat beside me like an extra guest. Quiet, weighty, polite. We let it stay. When it was over, they stood near the door a little longer than needed. One of them wiped their hands before reaching for their coat. Another turned back once, as if to speak, then didn't. But I saw it, in the way their shoulders dropped. In how they lingered. They didn't know how to say it, but they came, and maybe that was their way of starting again. I let the door close gently behind them, and stood still for a moment, letting that uneasy kind of hope settle in. The spoon paused, in my hand, hovering just above the bowl. The steam rose slowly, curling around my wrist like a whisper I couldn't quite catch. I stared at it, not seeing the soup, not hearing the quiet clinking of forks or the steady rain outside. I just listened to something inside me shift. There was a stillness in my chest, not cold, not sharp, just tight, like a breath I'd been holding for too long. I felt their voices around me, talking about weekend plans and some show they were watching. But it all blurred at the edges. The real words, my words, were sitting right beneath the surface. All I had to do was let them rise. My fingers tightened slightly around the spoon, my lips parted. I looked up, and without raising my voice, I stopped the room. I saw the video. Just that. 4 words. The clinking stopped. Someone shifted in their chair. One of them set their glass down too fast. The air got heavier, not louder, just thick, like the rain had moved inside with us. I didn't need to say more. I wasn't trying to make them squirm. I just needed the silence to end, and that was enough. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told them. I told them what it felt like, hearing my own voice played back as a joke, watching my hands become a punchline for strangers. I told them how I sat in the hallway, still holding a pitcher of lemonade, while their laughter rolled on, how I once sang lullabies to those same ears. And now the sound of me made them laugh. I didn't speak with anger. I spoke with weight. I felt like wallpaper, I said softly, like something you didn't even see. They didn't interrupt. They just listened, and somehow the fact that I didn't break made them break a little inside. Not to hurt them. Just enough to finally feel it. They didn't jump in with excuses, no scrambled words, just quiet movements. One stirred their drink long after the ice had melted. Another blinked too fast, eyes darting anywhere but mine. And I let them sit. In it, I didn't rescue them from the discomfort, because for once, they needed to feel it. That silence said more than a speech ever could. I wasn't there to guilt them. I wasn't asking for a speech or a hug or even an apology. I just needed them to understand what it cost, to be the one who gave, and then became the thing to laugh at. I'm not asking you to say sorry, I said. I just want you to know it hurt. They nodded. Slow, quiet. I stood up and started clearing dishes, not to leave the room, but to move. One by one, I placed each plate in the sink, the water still warm from before. I didn't feel bitter, just emptied out in a way that made room again. I wasn't asking to be right. I was asking to matter. Dinner had ended. The plates were bare, the napkins gently folded. but none of us moved right away. The rain slowed to a mist, brushing soft against the windows, and in that final silence, something shifted. It didn't sting. It didn't linger like a bruise. It settled, like dust, like something that had landed and wouldn't need to be picked up again. I caught one of them looking at me, not like I was old or awkward or someone to explain away, but like they remembered who I was, who I still am. The kitchen was quiet, just the way I wanted it. No little voices asking if they could lick the spoon, no questions about frosting or who got the corner piece. It was just me, and that was enough. The sun spilled through the open window, warm on my arms as I whisked in a steady rhythm. No rush, no noise. Just the sound of a bowl turning batter into something soft. I measured without looking around, not wondering who would show up. Not baking for anyone else's joy this time. The scent of lemon zest mixed with dried lavender filled the room. Bright and floral, like something fresh and old all at once. This cake wasn't for show. It wasn't a peace offering. It was mine. A small, sweet reminder that I still deserved good things, even if no one else was there to see them. Maybe especially then. I carried the plate to the porch with both hands, careful not to let the small candle in the center tip too far to one side. It wasn't for celebration. It was for presence, a way of saying, I'm still here. I set it gently on the table, lit the wick, and sat beside it with my tea steaming at my elbow. The wood beneath my bare feet creaked softly, worn from years of little feet that once danced across it. I sang a bit, just under my breath, the same birthday tune I'd sung more times than I could count. My voice cracked on the last line, but the birds didn't mind. They chirped and flitted through the branches like nothing had ever changed. And maybe that's what comfort really is. The kind that finds you anyway, even in the smallest rituals, even when no one else is watching. I took a bite, slow and steady. No one was watching. No one is waiting for a photo or a reaction, just me. The lemon hit first, tart, bright, followed by the lavender, soft and floral, like a memory unfolding on my tongue. The crumb melted gently, no fanfare, no second guessing. I closed my eyes, not to remember something lost, but to feel what still lived inside me. It tasted better this time, not because the recipe changed, but because I did. The light shifted through the trees like it used to, only this time there were no little shadows. Darting across the porch, no squeals, no thudding feet, just wind. Leaves rustling, the hum of a mower somewhere down the block, and me, the same boards beneath my chair, the same railing with the chipped paint. But it all felt different now, quieter, deeper. I wrapped the shawl tighter around my shoulders and let myself sink into the stillness, not empty, full. In a way I hadn't been before. I didn't feel forgotten anymore, just whole, in my own space. This porch used to be chaos and joy. Now it was something else. Sanctuary. Mine. I didn't get an apology, not a call, not a card, not a message saying they were sorry. But that morning, with the sun warm on my face and the birds still singing, I realized I didn't need one. The breeze came through soft, wrapping around my arms like something quiet but kind. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't always come with words. Sometimes it's letting go. In the deep breath you take when no one's around. I looked at the candle I'd lit earlier, its flame now flickering low, leaning to one side. And then, just like that, it went out. Not dramatic. Not suddenly, just done. I smiled. Sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it's just choosing to be gentle with yourself, even when no one else knows you're trying. That's what I gave myself that day. Forgiveness. On a warm spring breeze. If you've ever found peace in your own quiet, or baked something just to feel whole again, I hope this story sat gently with you. If you'd like to hear more pieces of my heart, you're welcome to stay. And if you've had a moment like this, I'd love to know.